RMT General Secretary Mick Lynch has been touring TV studios, and it's been beautiful.
Mick Lynch has previously said he would not negotiate with the Tory government. The head of the, you've said that. The head of the, let me finish the point. Hang on, let me finish the point. The head of the rail delivery group this morning on the Today programme said that he didn't want the government in the negotiation. We've made money available to the railway industry. It's up to the employers to negotiate with the trade unions. And what happened this afternoon was halfway through these negotiations, while they were ongoing, the unions came out onto the street and gave an impromptu press conference, I mean, TV footage, saying that the strike was going to continue.
OK, let's just pause. Hang on.
I mean, it's on video.
Now, Mick Lynch, excuse me. Mick Lynch, I want to ask you a question. I want to ask you a question. Would you be prepared to negotiate with the Tory government, yes or no?
Absolutely. I've met every Tory transport minister in the last year. Bus, rail, maritime and the Secretary of State. We've never said we won't meet the Tories. What we said was that they're not at the table. I'm negotiating with the employers. You've also lied that we left negotiations on Saturday and went to a rally. There were no negotiations scheduled for Saturday. You are a liar.
Right, there's a video of him walking out this afternoon giving a press conference. It's on videotape.
And then we went back to the talks.
Yeah, having said the strike's going to go ahead.
You are a liar.
OK, well, let's just...
the strikes were going to go ahead.
And you're a liar.
It's on video.
You're a liar. We were back at the talks this afternoon. We've just left them. And your Network Rail managers delivered statutory redundancy notices to us.
That clip was interesting because it was a good example of something. Our media is dominated by people from a narrow class and by others who've learned to play by their rules. One rule is you don't call people liars live on air. It's just not gentlemanly. The media is usually full of people who are in fact chums, pretending politely to be enemies. Journalists don't relate to British politicians as lying scum, but as respectable, well-meaning people. But like a sudden bolt, a worker gets on camera who knows his class are like aliens to these people, and he refuses to play by their rules. The RMT is at war with a government actively intervening in this dispute to keep pay down. It's a class war, of course. The Tories want to fight inflation on the backs of the poor. Here we see in all its glory, from Mick Lynch, actual contempt, the contempt that many of us feel for the ruling elite and the people who enable them. Let's go to another clip. On the first morning of the strikes, Kay Burley pretended to interview Mick Lynch.
The government is saying that they are going to bring in agency workers. My question to you is, I'm guessing that some of your members will still stay on the picket lines. What will they do if agency workers try to cross those picket lines?
Well, we will picket them. What do you think we'll do? We run a picket line and we'll ask them not to go to work. Do you not know how a picket line works?
What if they do anyway? I very much know how a picket line works. I'm much older than I look, Mr. Lynch. What will picketing involve?
Well, you can see what picketing involves. I can't believe this line of questioning. Picketing is standing outside the workplace to try and encourage people who want to go to work not to go to work. What else do you think it involves?
And what if they want... Well, I just wondered what else it might involve, because I very well remember the picket lines of the 1980s,
where are you going with your...
Mr. Lynch. I'm asking you what your members would do, Mr. Lynch.
Which picket lines are you talking about?
The miners' strikes. Miners' strike.
Yeah. Well, does it look like the miners' strike? What are you talking about?
No, it doesn't, Mr. Lynch, and I'm just asking, I'm just to clarify. I'm just trying to clarify. No, Mr. Lynch, and I'm sorry if you feel the need to ridicule me, but I'm just asking you what you expect your members to do
your questions
if agency workers...
verging into the nonsense.
I'm asking you...
as effectively as we can.
And what does that involve?
Look, there it is. That's what it involves.
So you won't stop agency workers crossing the picket line?
We will try to stop agency workers crossing the picket line by asking them not to go to work. What is it you're suggesting we will do?
I'm just asking you. I'm trying to clarify for the benefit of the British public who are being stopped from travelling around the country, Mr. Lynch. I'm just trying to clarify exactly what your members
you're trying to clarify?
Ask politely. Thank you for...
I'm replying to you politely.
To answer the question. Okay, Mr. Lynch.
I've answered the question about 6 times. If there are people trying to cross the picket line, we ask them not to cross it.
I'm asking questions on behalf of my viewers this morning, Mr. Lynch. I'm very sorry if you find it offensive.
Burley wants to plant an image in her audience's minds, striking railway workers as violent thugs. She's trying to bait Lynch into losing his temper, but he has absolutely no interest in engaging with her questions. Mick Lynch is refusing an ideological framing that's hardly ever challenged on TV, where poverty is very sad until people start to do something about it, and then they become the villains. We seem to have gone off into the world of the surreal, Lynch says. And he's right, but there's nothing unusual about that. Our whole media debate is a surreal circus until someone bursts it open. Unbelievably, Burley tweeted that clip to her 500,000 followers, and this is how she framed it. Agency rail workers will be stopped at picket lines and asked not to cross. Shocking. RMT Union's General Secretary Mick Lynch got a little flustered, explaining why. We have eyes, Kay. Notice that if you're not the kind of person the media respect, the kind they treat as mature and intelligent, then you're emotional and flustered. These are the kinds of ideological assumptions of our society, where the rich and powerful get to speak, and others are just thugs. We're going to show you one more clip. This is Mick Lynch on BBC Politics Live, serving swift justice to the Parliamentary Labour Party, representing by Shadow Cabinet member Jenny Chapman.
Keir Starmer made it clear that for the shadow cabinet, and it was not helpful for us to be on the picket line, and he's absolutely right. We shouldn't be putting ourselves in positions that make this worse. We are getting up every day trying to make lives better for our constituents.
All right, well, let's
put that to be in government.
Well, let's see if Mick Lynch agrees with you. What do you say to what you just heard from Jenny Chapman in terms of what the Labour Party's position is towards these strikes?
Well, the Labour Party was founded by the trade unions. In fact, it was founded by my trade union, the original resolution. So that's ironic, because we're not affiliated. And one of the reasons we're not affiliated is because Labour politicians since Blair have not identified with working class people. And failing to do that is one of the problems they've got in working class communities. And they've left the door open to populists and others to come into the situation. The Labour Party is about supporting working people, or it should be, not triangulating from opinion makers such as the Daily Mail and the Telegraph and the Times. So they've got to sort out their identity, and they've got to come up with a set of policies that are going to relieve working class poverty, are going to give us a stable workplace with good conditions and good minimum standards. That's what the Labour Party should be about. I welcome anyone that wants to join us on our picket lines and show us messages of support.
All right. Well,
if Keir Starmer can't do that, that's a problem for him, not for us.
Jenny?
But Keir Starmer wants to be Prime Minister. And in order to get that job, he needs to show that he's the sort of person who wants to resolve these kinds of disputes. And actually, Mick, you don't know anything about my background or my community or where I come from. So
I can't even see you. I don't even know who you are. So there you go.
Well, there you go. So, don't tell me who I am and whether or not I'm working class or whatever, any of those sorts of things.
I didn't tell you weren't working class. I don't even know your name.
Mick Lynch doesn't care about Jenny Chapman, and he doesn't care whether she wants to call herself working class or not. He's not interested in parliamentary intrigue and politicians' gossip. Where the media see an endless list of interest groups fighting each other, railway workers against doctors and teachers who need to get into work, the RMT says that kind of squabbling over crumbs only benefits the few who profit. They're brilliant because they're defining themselves as part of a class who know where their real enemy lies. Moya. One poll showed 58% of people supporting the RMT strike, which was quite surprising given all the incessant negative media coverage. Is something changing here?
I think there are a couple of factors that have contributed to this, and these are positive. One is, of course, the brilliant performance by Mick Lynch. And I think it's important to note that Mick Lynch, we shouldn't individualise him. It's a fantastic performance that he's put on in the media, but he is the front of a union. That is the whole point. He's not there to self-promote, as was suggested earlier on BBC Politics Live. He is there to represent the people behind him. A second thing, I think, is that we are in this period of the cost of living crisis. People are getting desperate. They're starting, I think, to recalibrate where allegiances should lie. And the more that they feel, out of control, the more that they feel like there is no sort of way through, the more they are looking for these alternatives. And finally, when people are pushed to the brink, perhaps we start seeing a return to this class consciousness and a recalibration of where allegiances should lie. And there's a third thing, I think, that is contributing to this more positive reception of the RMT strike. And I think the media have done this themselves. They keep citing the 1970s and the 1980s and the miners' strikes. And they're doing this in a way to try and make implications about, this idea of like the miners and evoking images of miners going up against police, implying in that one interview we saw with Kay Burley that, the miners responded violently. But they've forgotten that in the interim period, there's been a lot of historical scholarship which has showed exactly what happened with the miners' strike, exactly how badly the miners were treated. And the miners are now applauded, I would say, for their bravery and for their solidarity. We had films like Pride in 2014, which was a huge hit, which showed the links and solidarity between, gay and lesbian activists and striking miners. There's been a massive revision of how the miners were treated and received in the years between the miners' strike and now. And by evoking that, what they're doing, I think, is actually building solidarity between people and building a warmer reception for the RMT workers by creating positive connotations, which is not what they're intending to do, but it is what's happening.
It's interesting, Moya, you talk about those broader solidarities, because in the period since the 2019 election, we have seen the emergence of a set of social movements not focused explicitly around questions of class, but fighting to save our planet from total destruction and Extinction Rebellion, fighting to demand that Black Lives Matter and to reassess colonial legacies and their continuing presence, fighting against legislation, the Kill the Bill movement, against legislation that would crush civil liberties and especially target, say, Roma people. Do you think there's a possible linking now where we can see a revived industrial antagonism, workers saying we're workers and we don't want a surplus value to be extracted from our labor, and Black people saying we want to fight racism, and women saying we want, as people did after the murder of Sarah Everard, saying we want to be safe on the streets? Because all of these things are about people wanting to live in freedom and safety and dignity. Could these things all come together?
I hope they all come together. I think there's scholarship out there that's beginning to be done. There's a really good book that is out now. It was released this week. It's called Reclaiming Anti-Racism, and it's by Asfa Shafi and Ilyas Nagdi, which actually looks at the history of anti-racism movements in the UK and how they were workers' movements. They weren't separate things. The idea of anti-racism from below and the idea of socialism from below were completely integrated, because people understood that, your position as a worker will be affected by your position as a person of color or a woman, or the way these identities intersect. But first and foremost, if you build solidarity via your working identity, you can create these coalitions with other people, and then you come together and create those movements which address these concerns on all fronts. The workers' movements of the 1970s, the grassroots ones, were also anti-imperialist. And that class consciousness, I think, will allow a much more cohesive, united movement. We've also seen this, for example, recently in Dalston with immigration raids on Deliveroo workers, where you're understanding that these people are being subjected to the state violence because they are seen as, migrants who are not usually racialized as white. But there's also that identity as a gig economy worker, and people came out and they stopped these immigration raids. So I think these dots are starting to be added up again. And I think it's also because of a de-investment in the state. People are realizing the state is not coming to save them, whether that is the Conservatives who are just heaping oppression upon oppression, or whether that is Labour who is just doing absolutely nothing. And we had, I think, I would say, some of the left did invest in the state between 2015 and 2017, because we thought that there might be like this top-down sort of social democracy, but we're aware that's not going to happen now. And also that maybe that's not the most useful way. So there's a returning to that, grassroots class consciousness, and from there other things follow. So it can only be a good thing.
All of us here at Novara Media are working harder than ever to keep scrutinising establishment politicians and the media barons who protect them. We don't have billionaire funders. We don't have advertising partnerships. We're funded entirely by you. If you've ever thought about supporting us, now's the time to go to novaramedia.com/support and donate anything you can from just £1 per month. Defy the corporate media, join our monthly supporters, and help build our supporter base to 10,000 strong.